instill as much as mocktail into my life as I possibly could, which probably got me in more trouble. But I had a lot of interesting things happen to me at mocktail. And a lot of stories come about. Some of them are true, some of them are not true. And I'd like to share some of them with you tonight. I was born a little white child back in 1925. No. When I first started working at camp, I didn't have a lot of camping experience. So I learned a lot of things the hard way. And my first year at camp, they put me down in the Arapaho cabin. And I had Keith Burnett as my JC.
Happy birthday, Keith!
And we had a Arapaho cabin. And they were the most city-fied kids you've ever met. When they asked where the bathroom was, we pointed to the bathhouse. And they said, do we pee there from here? And we said, no, you had to go into the house to pee. And they said, why? I said, because we don't have it out here. And it was a bunch of little things like that. They didn't like the fact that there were bugs outside. And every time they found one, they had to come and get me to come identify it. And after the fourth kid came in to identify an ant, I started calling the kids by bug names. And they didn't appreciate that, because I called them all cockroaches. But if you remember correctly, at camp, at nighttime, we'd leave the kids in the cabin after we put them to bed. And then somebody had DD duty. Now, for those who were not certain about that, that wasn't venereal disease duty. That was village duty. And what that means is they sat down at the bathhouse and they watched all the cabins in case something happened, like somebody falling out of a bunk. You'd hear it. You'd hear the cabin doors opening. The kids would come out of the bathroom. You'd say, come here and let me sniff your head, see if you use shampoo. And you'd smell it and go, head and shoulders, right? You got to where you could identify the shampoo. And I was okay. Keith was pretty good at identifying toothpaste. Now, I'm not sure if he was sniffing or if he was kissing, but we won't get into details about that. We were up at the staff lounge, and we were up there till about 11:30, because staff lounge closed at 12, and we were always back in our cabins by 12, all the time. All the time. Never missed the time period, I don't think. Me and Keith were walking back, and as we got close to the cabin, I heard a noise. Now, I've never heard this noise before. It went something kind of like this.
How'd it go?
And I wasn't sure what that was. So I slowly walked up on the porch. Slowly walked across the porch. Opened the door. Let the door shut quietly. Bam! And I was inside. I reached over in my cabin area, grabbed my handy-dandy Boy Scout flashlight, pointed it up towards the ceiling and turned it on. It came on. I pointed it down, it went off. I pointed it up, it came on. Pointed it down, it went off. Up, on, down, off, up, on. Broken! It didn't work anyway. So I said, Keith, get your flashlight out. Keith had one of these aircraft landing flashlights. Had like 3 car batteries hooked up to it. When you turned it on, you couldn't leave it in one spot. It would start fires. It was like a lightsaber. He turned it on and moved it around, and we were looking in all the bunks, and all the kids were there. Some of them were getting suntan from Keith's flashlight. And we noticed one bunk, the kid was about halfway off, and the sleeping bag was all the way on. So we pushed the kid back up, we kept looking, and heard the noise again.
How'd that go?
Well, we took the flashlight, shined it in the corner, and there was a sleeping bag in the corner. And I thought, well, good gracious, some kid's falling out of the bunk, is asleep in the corner, snoring and beating his head up against the wall. So I reached over and grabbed the bag, and let me tell you folks, when that bag came up, sitting there, about 3 feet long, was the ugliest bug I have ever seen. It had purple stripes going down its back, polka dots that were pink on it, and it'd sit there in the corner, and when it would shake, it would go. And I was like, Keith, there's a big old bug over here. And Keith comes running over and takes a look. He says, my goodness, that bug must be 6 feet long.
How big?
6 feet. And I said, we got to kill this bug. He said, well, here, hit it with this shovel. Now, I didn't ask Keith where he got a shovel from. I didn't want to know. For all I know, he was carrying it in his underwear. But I don't know. He handed me a shovel. I smacked it on the bug, and it just bounced off. Bing! And I went, oh my goodness. All of a sudden, the bug, out from its body, popped all these legs. There must have been 22 of them.
How many?
22 legs. It opened its eyes, and they were orange. They were the size of headlights off of a semi-truck. And I was sitting there looking at it, and the eyes shot up in the air on antennas and started looking every which way. And this 10-foot bug,
How big?
10-foot
No way.
bug, opened up its wings like B-52 bombers' wings, stretched them out in the cabin. And I was like, uh-oh. From its mouth, shut out these 2 big, large pinchers. Like ice picks, just ching-ching, ching-ching. And it spoke. For the first time I heard that bug say, I'm going to eat you, fat boy. And I said, no! It started flapping its wings. It stuck all 22 legs into the floor. Its wings were flapping. Kids were flying all over the place. Keith got knocked out. He was laying on his bed. I was like, Keith, come on. Get up, get up. He says, kiss me, Barbara. I said, Keith, I ain't going to kiss you, buddy. You're on your own there. I went back to the bug. I reached up, picked up a big old foot locker, threw it down on the bug. It just bounced off. Ding. I said, uh-oh. I grabbed one of Keith's shoes. That'd kill anything. I threw it at the bug. It knocked it away. Said, I want you, fat boy. I said, don't eat me, bug. Please don't eat me here. Eat my junior counselor. And I picked Keith up and threw it at him. And the bug just blew him off. Boom. Not enough meat. I want you, fat boy. Come here. Wings were flapping. Kids were flying through the air. Stuff was flying every which way. That bug was coming right at me. I reached around. I looked. Grabbed a can of bug spray. Off bug spray. I said, yeah. Die, bug. And I sprayed the bug, opened his mouth, and took it inside. Ah, that tasted good. Oh, no. Bug let go, started flying around the cabin, knocking kids every which way. Keith was flying through the air, hollering for Barbara. I said, Keith, I'm not Barbara, wake up! He was like, oh, Barbara. Boy, stop! Bub was flying, backed me into a corner. It was coming right at me, those sharp pincers, eyes, big red, just swirling back and forth. I reached back, and my hand touched a weapon that has been outlawed in every major war the United States has ever fought.
Not that.
Yes. My hand went back and reached back, and I grabbed a pair of Camper's dirty underwear. Oh! And when that bug got close to me, I smacked it right across the head with it. The bug flew back up against the wall. Cat boy, I'm going to eat you now. I said, well, come on, Buggy. He took off again, running full force. I ran back with that underwear, smacked it right across his head, and just the force of the bug coming towards me knocked me back. But that underwear, when it hit the bug exploded. I mean, bug guts went everywhere. There was red bug guts on the light. There was green bug guts on the Campers. Keith was licking the grape bug guts. But it was just, I was exhausted. I dropped the dirty underwear on the floor.
Yeah.
Went over to my bed, flipped my sleeping bag over so I didn't have any bug guts on it, and laid down on top of it and went to sleep. Everything was fine and dandy. Went on to sleep. The Campers were all asleep. Some of them weren't in their original bunk. And some of them were sleeping on footlockers. And Keith was still talking to Barbara. But I went on to sleep that night. Next day, we were awakened. Fred Buff came in. Said, guys, you missed breakfast. I said, missed breakfast? It's not even daylight outside. He said, yeah, it is. And he opened the door. And it was daylight. Well, I woke up and got to looking. There was bug guts all over the screen. And it just cased everything. The kids started waking up and they had bug guts on them. They were like, ew. I said, well, we got to do cabin duty, guys. We got to clean up the cabin. I said, let's all go down to the bathhouse, clean off, take a shower. Keith, you run up to the pool, ask Jeff Knox for the sump pump.
What for?
Well, we needed it to clean up the cabin.
Make the CIT do it.
He let us borrow the sump pump. We brought it down, and we had to suck all that guts and stuff out of the cabin and just blew it outside into the yard. Meanwhile, the kids were bathing up. We got the cabin cleaned up and straightened up. Richard Gibson came down. Said, you guys can't leave this stuff out here like this. Clean it up. I said, clean it up? How are we going to clean it up? Look, the kids are over here playing with it like it's finger paint. And I looked, and there was two kids that were playing baseball. One had the eyeball, and the other one had a leg. I was like, guys, put that down. That's bug guts. And they were sitting there, and we were trying to figure out what to do with it. And while we waited, the sun dried all the guts up. It all became powder. So the kids took shovels and buckets and cans and stuff, and they scraped it all up in the pile. Then they were playing king of the pile. They were up on the top knocking each other over. Except for one kid that I had that was cheating. He had a leg and was beating everybody across the head with it. So we went and got some trash bags and put all the powder in the trash bag. decided we better throw it away. So we cleaned it all up, got it in bags, and all of us were walking up to the dining hall in a straight line. And in the back of the line, I had one kid, and he started going, hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off the work week, guys. And stop! He said, okay. Da-da, 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 da-da. Don't hum it! Okay. Stop whistling! Just carry your stuff and let's throw it away. All right, so we were getting it up. There was a counselor up there named Mark Hamilton. Mark Hamilton. Mark was the finest looking specimen of male that he ever thought there could be. And he would stand in front of the window mirrors in the bathroom, make sure he didn't have any zits on his face. And then, after he posed for a while, he went to his cabin where he had a shadow relief of himself. And he would stand there to make sure he hadn't gained any weight. If he gained any weight, Mark would run 5 or 6 miles. He liked to run up to the scar from camp and then back down. Well, we were walking up to the dining hall. Mark was running back down. And all of a sudden, Donna, who was in the arts and crafts shop, come running out. We're out of paint! We don't have any paint! What are we going to do? The kids are painting rocks today. We don't have any paint! And I said, wait a minute. We may have something here that might work. She said, what is it? I said, it's bug guts. She said, bug guts? I said, yeah, but it's colored bug guts. She said, let me see. So I took the little cup from her hand, dipped it in the green bug guts, came out with some of the powder. I said, go run some water in that. She went over to the craft shop, ran some water in it, stirred it up, come back. She says, it's too watery. Mark Hamilton, who had been running his up to the scar bit, saw somebody with a cup of drink, took it from Donna, and turned it up. And I said, Mark, don't drink that, that's fun. He said, hey, it's pretty good. What is that? Well, if I told him it was bug guts, he was going to barf on me right there. So I told him it's bug juice. He said, that's pretty good. Can I have some more? I said, I got a whole bag of it, buddy. Help yourself. I took the eyeball up out of the bag. He went ahead and dipped his little cup in there, got him some more, and drank it, and was happy. Well, I watched him. He didn't die. I figured it must be okay to drink. So we took it up to the dining hall. Now, the cook had been serving milk every meal. And the kids were tired of milk. Except mine, who I told it was goat milk. They thought that was cool. So we took the bug guts and we put them in these envelopes that they had and sealed the envelopes up and put them down in boxes. And in the back of Camp Montville, last time I checked, they had 250 of those boxes still left of bug juice. And if you go up there and they fix a meal and they've got this drink in there that's colored, like cherry colored or orange colored or grape colored, don't drink the yellow color. Because that came from the bladder. And that's bug juice. We had a counselor at camp. Well, not a counselor. We had a assistant counselor that name was, I don't remember his full name. Gary Adane is all I remember. He wasn't liked very much because he asked all the girl counselors out except Elizabeth Penfield. She was upset over that he didn't ask her out. We're not sure why he didn't ask her out. Except Penfield was dangerous with a fork. But we won't get into that right now. Elizabeth killed many of kids at camp. She'd be caught for counselor hunt. She kissed the kid to get free. She kissed the kid and he'd pass out and fall in poison ivy. Then we wouldn't find him. But Gary was a strange guy. And one night he went unto these hills, the Indian saga over in North Carolina. And a bunch of us boy counselors decided we were going to have some fun and move all his stuff out to the bandstand. Well, first offhand, we had to break into the cabin. And we went into the cabin, the twin house, got up the stairs, and then he had a padlock on his door going to his room. Well, being as I was the only black guy there, I suggested that we take the door off the hinges. Because everybody else was willing to quit at that point. And they said that was a great idea. So we looked around and we found a green-handled screwdriver.
What was it?
Green-handled screwdriver. Actually, to be technically, it was a left-handed green-handed screwdriver. And we used that to pop the pins out of the hinge. Got the door open. About 6 of us in there. We started grabbing stuff. Grabbed the mattress, pulled it off the bed, and found the international counselor's wallet that he'd been looking for about 6 weeks. Had his passport and all his money in it and everything. Couldn't find it. Now, right there at that point, oh, of course, there was a little .22 pistol that he had under his mattress. We knew about that, though. He was Barney Fife. Sam Marmon, being the leader of this little escapade, decided we needed to leave the stuff there, take the wallet over to Richard's cabin, let him handle it. So quickly we put the door back, put all the stuff back, took the wallet over to Richard's house, put the door back on the hinges. Next day after breakfast, Richard talked to Gary. Gary claimed he didn't know nothing about it. When Richard pointed out that the pistol that he carried was underneath there, and he had to have seen it when he put the pistol there, Gary got mad and wanted to know how he knew about the pistol. Richard never told him that we broke into the cabin. Gary Adane got upset. He quit that day. Went down, packed his stuff in his car. About hit one of the counselors who was in the crutches coming out the kitchen door as he shot out of camp. Now what I didn't tell you was after we put the door back on, we took that screwdriver, threw it out in the woods so we didn't have any incriminating evidence. Well, we just knew Gary was going to come back into camp at night, kill everybody. And as proof of that, some kid in a Arapaho cabin found that screwdriver and brought it back in. So we took it and threw it again into the woods. Next day, that screwdriver appeared on my porch. I threw it again into the woods, down by the lake, over in the part that had the quicksand. I know it had quicksand because I ran through it one time going over to stop the guy still in the canoe. Luckily, I was moving pretty fast at the time, so I didn't sink, but... And it still come back on my porch. That screwdriver haunted me all summer long. Finally, I took it and I gave it to Charlie. And every time Charlie worked, he pulled out that screwdriver. And it flashed in front of me just like a memory. And I said, Charlie, what are you doing with that left-handed screwdriver? He said, it's not left-handed. I said, sure it is. It's written on there right there. He said, yeah, but I fixed it. So I didn't mess with Charlie too much. Charlie was a man all to his own. He'd go hunting. And I heard the story one day, he was sitting there eating a sandwich up next to his truck, and a buck walked up, and he took his rifle with one hand, fired and shot the buck. Buck took off. Charlie said, go get that buck. They said, the deer's still alive. Charlie said, no, it ain't. They went 30 yards, the buck was laying there dead. Charlie said they brought that buck back. He cut off a hind quarter of that, made a mistake, cooked it right there and waited for the next deer to pop up over the truck. We did a lot of things that we weren't proud of at camp. And a lot of things that, as descendants of us, you're not allowed to do. No, I was never upset. I was embarrassed by some of them. I'll never forget the night I was doing cookie thief. I broke into the dining hall, stole a box of cookies from there. Chocolate chip cookies, 425 to a box. All of them double chipped. And I'd eat the chips off of them and then I'd put the cookies in the bag. And then I would go around, I wrote little poems on the bags about the cookie thief coming through, jumping through the bushes and jumping through the trees, leaving little cookies wherever he pleases. And I'd go up in the girls' village. And I'd have to wait till the procession of girls going to the bathroom stopped. Well, what happens was, eventually what happens is the bathhouse becomes too far. So the little girls would just start squatting in the road. It may be wrong, but they were just tired and they didn't want to walk all the way to the bathhouse. And they didn't know that I was hiding over there behind the tree with a bunch of cookies and bags up in the girls' village. And I never did cookie thief every night at the same time. So a lot of times I'd go into the cabin to put cookies. And since it was a girls' cabin, I tried my best not to look at the little girls in the cabin, and I looked at the counselors. That was always enlightening. Because there were several counselors that didn't like the heat. And the sleeping bags were like 0 degrees, made for like sleeping in frostbite winter stuff. So they wouldn't be under the sleeping bags. And I think some of the counselors would actually go over and uncover the other counselors when I was doing cookie feeding. But there was this one counselor that caught me doing cookie thief outside, and she came out and stood on the deck. And if you remember correctly, Mohawk Cabin was slightly higher off the ground. And I was down low looking up, and she had on a very big t-shirt and nothing else. And she looked down at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I looked up and turned my eyes and went, "Oh." She said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I got something in my eye." I just handed her a bag of cookies. I'd already had my fun. I went ahead and left after that. Then there was Youth Cabin. That was to test on boys who wanted to prove themselves men by sneaking up to the girls' village. And the problem was that they told me about it. Last night they were going to sneak up to the girls' village. They're going to wait till their counselor fell asleep and go. I said, okay. I had gone up ahead and dug a trench in the road. It was all soft sand. Put me in a little plastic bag in there, filled it with gasoline, and waited. I heard them coming up the trailway. They were like a herd of woolly mammoths. Tongues lagging out. Girls' village. As they got up close to the road, I set fire to it. When those flames leaped up, they freaked out. And there were 10 new paths back to you. Because I don't think any one of them touched the real path. They didn't try sneaking out anymore. Then there's the one where I just told my cabin to get quiet. Bedtime. We had finished Indian ceremony and I had taken off my lion cloth and was laying on my bunk in my underwear. And all of a sudden we heard kaboom! And they said, "Rudy?" I said, "I'm up." I grabbed my machete. Now what I was going to do against somebody with a gun, I'm not certain. But I opened the door and there stood Richard in the road wearing his white Tyler YMCA t-shirt, white shorts, talking to girls in the woods. So I walked out there barefooted in my underwear, machete in my hand. I was going to help Richard. "What's going on, Richard?" He said, "Somebody's in these woods and I don't know who they are. I'm going to start shooting in these woods if they don't come out now. You better come out of the woods. I'm going to start firing into it next shot." "Don't shoot, don't shoot. We're coming out. We're just in stickers." I said, uh-huh. I stood there beside Richard. Richard looked over at me and looked down at my underwear. He said, "Don't you think you better go back inside and put some clothes on?" I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "I was just going to try to frighten them, though." He said, "Yeah, you're going to frighten somebody like that with a machete in your underwear." It's a great big knife used for chopping wood and vines and scaring people. I carried it on my back on hikes just in case some of the locals came down. I went into Dude Cooper's store. Dude had a gas station down there. It was his little kingdom. He had his chair back there in the back. And apparently not too many African Americans come into his store. Luckily, Charlie had spoken for me. I walked in, he said, "Boy, come here." Now, I'm a big man. Being called boy doesn't bother me. And I understand that was just his way of calling me. I went over there. He reached down in the side of his chair and pulled out a little .22. He said, "How you like that?" I said, "I like it very much, sir. And I understand exactly what you're saying to me." He said, "Well, let me show you something." And he took a bullet out of it and handed me the bullet. It was a little star tip bullet. He said, when that goes in you, it breaks off and comes out in several different places. I said, I understand. I'd like to buy this soda right now, if that's all right with you. And I don't have anything else on me. He said, you're all right. You can keep that bullet. I said, well, thanks. Believe it or not, I still got that bullet at my house. Dude Cooper was an amazing man. We wrote a song about Dude Cooper. How he liked to wear women's clothes. We never sang it for him, but we would go by there with muscular dystrophy camp, and he'd come out with a whole box of chocolates and candies for the kids, to give it to the kids. He was always good. Charlie was a man you didn't want to mess with. Charlie, on my first week at camp, I was carrying rifles down to the rifle range. Charlie come down with a tractor and decided it was going to be fun to chase the black guy. Well, he was amazed at how fast I could run with a tractor after me and how high I could jump over pine trees. There was a bunch of little pine trees near there, and I was jumping over them to get away from the tractor. Well, after that, it became a thing with Charlie. If he was on the tractor and I was walking anywhere in camp, he turned the tractor towards me. And he was amazed at how fast I could get to the dining hall, how fast I could get to the pool, how fast I could go up a tree. And he chased me every day I was at camp, which wasn't half as bad as Blue in the kitchen, who wanted to see my blue blood. I hear you people don't have the same color blood. Come here. And he'd whip out a knife. And he'd chase me around that little table inside the kitchen. I say, Blue, there ain't no need for that. And finally, Nell would tell Blue to cut it out, and I'd be all right. One night while I was doing Cookie Thief, I did Fox Cabin. I didn't know that there was a logging road behind Fox Cabin. As I'm running through the woods in pitch black, all I remembered was the road disappeared. The ground just disappeared and I fell down into this ditch. When I got up, I had split my pants from the zipper in the front all the way back to the belt loop in the back. Well, I went to Nell in the kitchen. I said, Nell, do you know how to sew? She said, yes. I said, I split my pants. Do you mind if I bring them up here and you sew it? She said, no, I don't mind. Bring them on up here. She said, I'll do it during one of my breaks. I brought them up there to her, and she looked at me and she said, Lord, son, what were you eating? I said, I didn't blow them out low. I fell and they split. She said, good gracious, son, what did you fall off of, the fire tower? I said, I'm not certain, but I think there's a road back there. I found it. After she sold her up, I started calling her mom. Because if that woman told me anything, I did it. Of course, the one time when I wrote down for dinner, I was taking my cabin camping, and we wanted some of those horse feed bars. I didn't like granola bars. We had those old hard granola bars. Astronauts took them into outer space. They didn't eat them up there and they brought them back. We bought them at a discount. I said, I want those horse feed bars. We went camping. Got the hot dogs out, gave all my kids hot dogs, figured I'd give them a granola bar. Opened it up, and there was horse feed in the aluminum foil. I said, well, go ahead, kids, eat it. They said, can we eat that? I said, it's just granola with a little bit of brown sugar in it. It's fine. Go ahead. I had 3 kids partake of it. They were thankful when we got back to camp so they could go to the bathroom. Apparently, granola horse feed goes right through your body, cleans out everything. They enjoyed the toilets, which was really funny. Nobody else enjoyed the toilets. Then we had Robbie Carney.
Oh, no.
Robbie Carney was a kid. On the farm, his mother put down the child, took medicine to help him calm down. I thought, wonder what kind of kid this is. She dropped him off, came in, made his bed, got in the car and left. I said, Robbie, get your swimsuit, go down to the bathhouse and change. He grabbed his swimsuit and towel, ran down, halfway to the bathhouse, stopped. Turned around and come back and said, what am I supposed to be doing? I said, oh, this isn't good. I knew right then and there we were going to have trouble. Robbie Carney is an ADHD child. Every sense of the word. He would ask you a question, and before you could answer it, he'd already gone on to the next subject. What time is it? Where are we going? What is that? He was smart. He just learned things at a faster rate than most people could talk. John Norquist had a telescope one year out at camp and had the kids out there looking through the telescope. And Robbie was just sitting there on the ground pointing up at the sky, pointing to the constellations, and was calling them all out. And he was right. And he was coming up with names that I'd never heard of. Yeah, that's the belt over there, and this is over here, and that's Saturn. And I went, that's not Saturn. He said, yeah, that's Saturn. I said, that's not Saturn. And John said, yeah, that's Saturn, look. And we looked, and sure enough, it was Saturn. I said, Robbie, how do you know that? He said, I studied it. By the way, can I have a hot dog? I said, well, you just ate. I'm hungry. Phil Young had him. And he kept Robbie from the store because Robbie wanted to buy all the sugar-coated stuff there was. And Phil wouldn't let him do it. Finally, on the last day, the store was open. Phil took Robbie to the store with his coupon book and let him buy all the big pixie sticks he could buy and all the Coke he could drink. And then when his parents came and got him, he shoved him in the car and put his stuff in there and said, bye!
And did not give him his medicine that morning.
Yeah, he didn't get his medicine. Probably somewhere down around Dude Cooper's, the car went off the road. I think the parents left Robbie in it and just left the car. No, Robbie come back several years. I think the worst year was the year that he found out that there was a pilot light on the hot water tank in the back of the boys' bathhouse. And he would go back there and blow it out. And that night, the boys would have to take cold showers. And Charlie would come down and relight it. And he'd sneak around there again and blow it out. This went on for about a week before we finally caught him. And then, John's favorite kid, Douglas Pardue. John and Douglas got into it one day. John walked into the bathroom and Douglas decided he was going to lock it. And he closed it, and closed the latch and put a stick down through it and left John in the bathroom and stood outside the bathroom and laughed at John as John tried to get out. And John kept trying to get out, and finally John just lost it and put his hand through the screen. Douglas took off running. John pulled it out. Last I heard, Douglas was put into a trunk and then suspended above Rotary Chapel. What Douglas is doing now, I'm not positive. He was a bartender at Aspen last I heard. Douglas was a little streetwise kid that could have run any game in New York. He had the body of a well-trained athlete, and he had the mind of a red-headed stepchild. And he would do things just to aggravate you. Nothing big, nothing bad, be late to class. Every day. Well, I caught him one day sitting on the bridge going over to Youth Cabin. I said, "What you doing?" "Being late." "Boy, get to class." "Oh man, you're gonna ruin my perfect record." "Yeah, I'm gonna ruin your perfect record." "Hey Rudy, by the way, I found one of those beer bottles." "What'd you do with it, Douglas?" "I hid it." "Well, what are you gonna do with it?" "Drink it." "Douglas, you know what'll happen if you drink that?" "Know what?" "It'll stunt your growth, buddy. And I'm not talking about how tall you'll get." He said, "No, it won't." I said, "Douglas, think about all the winos you see. Do they ever have women?" He brought me that beer bottle. Now he's a bartender giving it out to other people. Oh, Lord have mercy. And there was the time we had a nurse that we didn't like too much, and we took a horse that had diarrhea and put it in the infirmary. She was surprised when she woke up to the horse being in the infirmary. Not half as surprised as the decoration on the floor. It took us about 3 hours to clean that up, disinfect it. We said the horse was sick. She was the nurse. She was supposed to take care of it.
Can you do Yehu's story?
Yehu's story.
That's the other one.
That's a tough one.
What?
The Yehu's.
Way back before
Okay.
Columbus comes to America,
There's,
I was there.
here it goes.
Of course I was there because I'm as old as dirt. God made me right after he made dirt. I watched Columbus come across. I told him which rock to step on, how to treat the Indians for a while, so they got along. No, before Columbus came, this whole area was populated by the Cherokees. And this mountain area was full of deer, rabbit, raccoon. It was a very popular camping site for the Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee Nation at this time was quite large and had a very wise chief. And the chief would take food and they would store it. They had learned to dry fish and that kind of stuff and dry meat, and he would take part of it and store it away. And the tribe never understood why, because there was always plenty of food. Well, one year there wasn't plenty of food. It was a very hot summer. Plants were dying. The animals were leaving. And they started having to rely on some of the stored food. And the chief, being wise, knew that the braves who hunted needed the most food to keep up their strength. And so he would sanction out the food to the warriors. The warriors, who were not used to food being sanctioned out, thought they should get a bigger part of the food. So several of them broke into the storeroom and stole food, brought it to their families, and they and their families ate it. When this was found out, the chief banned these people from the tribe. Told them they had to leave. And they could not take anything with them except the clothes that they had on their back. So about 43 of these Indian members left the tribe and went into the mountains. Found a cave. And the theory was that if they were ever seen, they were to be killed on sight. So they went into this cave, and they went deep into the cave. And while they were deep in the cave, they found water. And in this water, there were fish that lived, but the fish were blind. But their bodies glowed. It was fluorescent. So for a while, this is what they had to eat. They had no bows, no tools, nothing to make weapons with. And in this cave, fish was all that they had. So they would catch these fish and they would eat them. And slowly as they learned about the cave, they found out the cave had rats. And they would catch the rats. But they couldn't build a fire. The smoke would come out of the cave and alert the other Indians who was in there. So they would bash the rat in the head to kill it, and then they would just peel the fur off and eat the meat. Soon, there weren't many rats in the cave. And they learned that there were bats. And so they started climbing up the sides of the wall. And what they didn't realize was that each generation that was born in the cave was different from the generation before it. They grew hairier because the caves were cool. Their fingernails turned into claws, which allowed them to grab under the wall into the crevices and pull themselves up. Children that were born weren't born and weren't given clothes. They didn't have any. So the fur on their body grew thick. Their hair did. So they were completely fur covered. But the oddest thing about each child as it was born was the way that its eyes changed. At night, your eyes, the pupils, the black parts, grow and open up to allow more light in. Well, in the cave, the only light was coming from these fish. Well, these people were eating these fish, and their body was taking the fluorescence in the fish and was slowly putting it around their eyes. Their eyes were getting bigger. They no longer had color, just a large black pupil on their eyes. And as each generation was born, their nose, the bridge in between their eyes, grew smaller. And their eyes grew larger so they could see better at night. See in the caves where the bats were, where the rats were. Those with the better eyesight lived. Those whose eyesight didn't change, didn't. And as each generation was born, the bridge of the nose got smaller and smaller till it disappeared, and the two eyes grew together to make one large eye. This creature lived in the caves. And when there was no more food in the caves, they had forgotten why they were there. And they would search the cave, and finally they found the way out of the cave. Now, to explain all this to you guys, you have to understand. We used to take campers over to Abrams Creek Campground. and we would camp out over there. There's a ranger station there. And when we wanted to come back home, we had to call camp, and they'd send down the station wagon to come pick everybody up, and it would pick us up and bring us back to camp. Well, one day while I was in the ranger station calling camp to pick us up, I saw the ranger's logbook. Now remember, I told you guys straight off that I wasn't much of a camper before coming to Montville. And I'm looking at this ranger's book, and there's a section in the book labeled Unexplainable Occurrences. Well, I thought UFOs had landed in the park. So I opened it up to look for UFOs. And what I saw was the word Yahoo, which in my terminology was a chocolate drink that you drink. And I thought, well, what do you know? Somebody was killed by a Yahoo bottle. What's so unexplainable about that? And I got to looking through the book, and it was all these stories about Yahoos. And I thought, what is a Yahoo? And I kept hearing these 7-foot creatures covered with hair, one eyeball. I said, oh my goodness, somebody's been drinking too much of the moonshine. And I went back to camp, and up at camp, there was a man known as Grandfather Montville. He lives down the road a piece. He's lived in this area all his life. And I asked him what a Yahoo was. And I thought he was going to tell me it was a little chocolate drink in a bottle. And he said, where did you hear about Yahoos? I said, the ranger station. And he told me about the Indians that I just told you about living in the caves. And he said, when they come out, they're hunting for food. And these creatures got to where they were so afraid of people that they started learning to communicate in the sound that animals make. A cricket chirping, an owl hooting. This is the way they spoke to each other. But when they found something that was interesting and they needed other Yahoos to help get it, they would call Yahoo! Yahoo! I said, okay. One of the stories I read in the Ranger's book was about a couple of guys that went camping up in the Smokies, and they broke several rules. First offhand, they had guns. Second offhand, they had beer. Nobody here has ever done that, I know. But these guys had gone out and set up their tents off the main path, and were sitting there drinking with a fire going like we are here. And they were sitting there talking, and one of the guys says, stop, listen. And the other guys listened, and all they heard was the sounds of the forest. He said, no, I know I heard something out there. And the other two guys looked at each other and said, yeah, it's probably one of them Yahoos. Yahoo! He said, no, listen. And they all got quiet and listened. And then the other two went back going, Yahoo! He said, guys, there's something out there. I know there is. He says, I'm going to build the fire up. He went over to the fire. He started piling logs onto the fire, making the big bonfire so he could see all around. And as he sat there looking at the fire, he reached in his pocket and pulled out a silver dollar that was his lucky silver dollar. He rubbed it a few times and set it on a rock next to the fire. And then he noticed that his friends weren't making any noise anymore. He turned around to look, and both his friends were sitting there staring out past the fire. Well, he looked around the fire, and standing there, about 7 feet tall, was a gray Yehu. And it was just standing there. And the guy who had put the silver dollar on the rock said, "Get your gun!" And the other two guys woke up at that point in time. And the Yehu grunted. And all of a sudden, all around the campsite, Yehus started popping up. The guys dove into the tent to grab their guns. But only one come out with a gun. He had a pistol. And he was firing the pistol. And every time he hit a Yehu, it disappeared into the woods. But then another one would take its place. The other two guys dove in, but Yehus grabbed their legs and pulled them out and started delimbing them. With pulling their arms off, pulling their legs off. The guy with the gun could hear the screaming. But he kept firing till the gun was empty. He dropped the gun and pulled the knife out. And when the Yehu come up and tried to grab him, he stabbed it. And the Yehu fell back. But he lost his grip on his knife. He knew that was it. He knew he was gone. He said he stopped and he looked at that silver dollar, and it had started to melt on that rock because it was so hot. He wondered why he hadn't died yet. And he looked, and there was one Yehu left that was coming straight towards him. He quickly looked on the ground for anything that he could use to kill it. And all he found was a stick, about 12 inches long, about as thick around his finger. He knew he couldn't do any damage with that. And he decided that what he was going to do is he was going to pray to God. And he dropped to his knees right there in front of the fire. And he looked down at that silver dollar, realizing it didn't bring him any luck. And then he got an idea. Just as the Yehu grabbed him, he took that stick, jabbed it into that silver dollar and stuck it on it. And when the Yehu spun him around, he stabbed it into its eye. The Yehu screamed and threw him. That was the last he remembered. When he woke up, he was in Blunt Memorial Hospital. He had been unconscious for about 4 days. While he was in the hospital, the police come by and asked him what had happened. And he told the same story that I just told you. And as they were going out the door, he heard the police say he was drunk. It was probably just a bear. A Yehu. No such thing. And the guy realized that his buddies had been killed. And that the police didn't believe his story. Next came in some park rangers. And they asked him, what happened? He said, why should I tell you? You're not going to believe me. Ask the police. I told them the story. And one of the rangers says, were you attacked by 7-foot creatures covered with hair, with one eye? And he said, yes. He said, how do you know? He said, when we went up to pick up the bodies, we found hair that was too long to come off of any human. And they wrote down his story, just like I told it to you. So tonight, as you're trying to make your way back to the cars, just remember that if you hear a noise that's an animal that you hadn't heard before, it just might Yehu. Yeah, right. In the deepest heart of Africa. What? From Maryville, there was an explorer that went to Africa. And he took with him a nurse, his wife, and several people. And they went into Africa. And they began hearing stories of these people that grew these giant chickens. And then he decided he wanted to go see these chickens, because if he could bring one back and he could breed it, he'd be a rich man. So he went as far as the roads went, and then traveled by pathway deeper into Africa. And one night, he woke to screaming. And his wife had been taken from their camp by a tribe. He looked for her and looked for her. They searched and searched. And while they were looking for her, the nurse became very affectionate towards this man and finally convinced him that the wife was no longer alive and that they needed to go back to Maryville. So he left, came back. Bought a nice house. Him and the nurse got married, had children. He began teaching over at Maryville College. His wife had been taken and was put into a grass hut after walking for many days. And when she woke up, she felt like she'd been drugged. But she knew she had to get away. So she took the blanket and took it off of her and realized that one of her legs had been removed. And in its place, the tribe had put a large chicken foot and attached it to her body. This was to prevent her from running away. She got up and learned to walk with it. And she would drag it, and it would go swoosh, and she would plop it down. She couldn't move very fast. But she learned to walk on it. And she would constantly walk, and she would drag it, because it was slightly longer than her other leg. And she would drag it, and then plop it down. Finally, one night, when the tribe was in a drunken stupor, they had some sort of celebration. Maybe Watuga, the fire god, came down and spoke to them. I'm not certain. They made this type of drink that was intoxicating with fruit. And they were all drunk. And she took off. She had learned the paths around the village and knew which way she needed to go. And knew that she had to daybreak to get as far away as she possibly could. And she hid in a cave for about a week. She'd taken enough food with her to be able to survive that. After that, she figured the tribe was no longer looking for her. So she come out and worked her way to the coast. She always wore a long dress, but she just walked with a limp. And everywhere she went, you would hear that sound of swoosh plop. Swoosh plop. She got on a freighter, worked as the cook on the freighter, made her way back to the United States, and hitchhiked all the way back to Maryville. Looked in the phone book and found her husband's name. Went to the house. The husband was teaching class that night, but the nurse was there with her child. When she opened the door and realized who was there, she slammed it shut. This angered the chicken foot woman. And she took that chicken foot, raised it up, pushed against that door, and shattered it. The nurse was screaming. The little girl was screaming. The lady was just upset and mad. She realized what had happened. When she had been taken, the nurse had sweetened herself up for her husband. And now she was back and going to get him back. First thing she did, she grabbed the nurse with that chicken foot and squeezed. And the woman passed out. The little girl was screaming in the study. She was under the desk. The lady with the chicken foot raised it up high and just brought it down on her desk and shattered it, killing the little girl. And then she went in the living room and sat down and waited. The husband got home from school. Immediately noticed the door was busted open. Came in, and the chicken foot woman was sitting there. And he realized that it was his old wife. And he started trying to explain what had happened and how he had looked for her, but she wouldn't hear any of it. She got up and started coming toward him. He backed up till he tripped over the body of his second wife. He knew that this woman was going to kill him. And he ran out the door, jumped in his car, and took off to the Maryville police. When he got there, he finally found an officer, got them to come to the house. All they found was his second wife and their child. Both had been killed. They never found the woman. But if you talk to some of the people that live on Montville Road, live up over the mountain, they'll tell you that on some nights, as you drive the road, you'll see a woman limping down the road. And at night, some nights when you're camping, you can hear the swish plop as she walks through the forest, looking for another husband. So all you guys who aren't married, you better run.
I'm gone.
You can totally outrun her. It's all right. My goodness.
No, there's Montville stories. We can go on forever for Montville stories.
Telling them.
We had the international counselor that come up to Montville, and she had a swim class, and she taught the swim class. You tired? You want to sit on my lap? Lay on me?
Oh. You gotta take away our entertainment. Exactly. Dude.
I know you are. But you had a rough day. Let me tell one more story and then we'll go, okay?
Are you serious?
No, I'm really. Seriously.
He has never been serious.
Let me tell you one more story.
Tell 5. Vouch for that 100%. Tell 5.
All right. Her name was Maru. Maru had a wonderful body, but she was from Colombia.
So she was Mexico and Mauricio
Yeah,
was
she was Mexican.
She was Mexico and he was
You were from Peru.
And she was
Peru from Peru.
she taught a swim class at the pool, and then afterwards she had a horse lessons that she had to teach. And the kids from the pool had all left, and it was a break for me. So I was sitting at the pool, doing what I normally do, watching the kids at the pool. She was the only one at the pool. And she started to change on the pool deck. She had a towel, and she was standing on it. And proceeded to take off her wet swimsuit and get dressed. I waited till she was dressed before I went over there and talked to her. And I explained to her that here in America, we don't do that. She asked me why. It's just natural. I said, yes, and the dogs were doing it. I tell them to stop too. We just don't do that kind of stuff. And I showed her where the pool house was, and if she had to change, she could go down there and change. So for the next couple of weeks, I kept looking through the roof of the pool house to see if there was a hole. And there wasn't. But every now and then I'd go down to the door and I'd peek in to see if she was all right.
Oh, gentlemen.
See if she needed help buckling something up or tying something. That was before I met my wife.
No, it wasn't.
I can witness that. That was not before you met your wife.
You are so going to have a long ride home. It was 3 years after you met your wife.
I tried my best to get my wife to do the same thing, but she wouldn't follow suit. Finally, in 1995, I stopped asking her to do it. Stopped making late night trips up to camp when nobody was here. Charlie has a wife named Brenda.
Oh, we love Brenda.
Brenda was a wonderful person. She was a beautician.
She's a wonderful person.
Loved animals.
Still does.
I was driving back from a night off, and her gold Trans Am was in front of me, and I had Ricky Webb with me, and we decided we were going to follow her all the way into camp. After doing that for about 3 miles, I decided, and she parked in front of her house, I decided I better get out and let her know it was me.
Yeah.
And as I walked up to the window of her car, she said, "Oh, thank goodness, Rudy, it's you." And she put her 22 back in her purse. After that, Brenda had all the whole road that she wanted. I didn't follow Brenda no more. Folks, this has been wonderful.